Okay, through a glass darkly, written and directed by Ingmar Bergman from 1961. Sven Nykvist is the cinematography, as always with Bergman. Cast: Harriet Anderson plays Karin, Gunnar Warnstrand is David, Max van Sydow Martin, Lars Parsgard is Minus. It's a 90-minute film with subtitles, of course. It's in Swedish. First of his bleak but outstanding films from his trilogy of chamber plays about faith, alienation and the emptiness of life. It followed Winter Light and The Silence. The action takes place to a 24-hour period. It opens on a hearing Bach Suite No. 2 in D minor, barren landscape of a remote island, and an occult-like mysterious mood of the film. It's the islands in the Baltic, in the nightless Scandinavian summer. There are 4 members of a family living in a well-stocked with food but bare cottage. The patriarch is the detached, emotionally crippled and brooding but successful novelist named David by Bornstrand. His pretty daughter Karen is Harriet Anderson. She's just been released from a mental hospital and suffering from an illness, of course, that has not been fully explained to her by the doctors or her family. She's married to Martin, a medical professor, played by Sydow, who tries to be supportive, but she shuns his romantic overtures after hearing dark voices from within. Karen's younger 17-year-old brother, played by Lars Parsgard Minus, is a callow youth aspiring to be a writer like his dad, but is frustrated over his unfulfilled sexual desires and lacks confidence that he can face the adult world, and has an inferiority complex over his stunted intellectual ability. Karen's disintegration takes a firm hold when she secretly rummages through her dad's desk and discovers in his diary that her illness is a form of incurable schizophrenia, and that he couldn't resist using her illness as a subject for his latest novel. It leads to Karen's breakdown inside the hull of a shipwreck, and things become increasingly darker when Karen hears voices, which she says are the voices of God, coming out from behind an attic door. When the doors open, God is pictured as a spider, with a security blanket of a belief in God removed. Karen shivers up in fear and has to be evacuated to a hospital by a helicopter. It ends with David trying to reassure his fragile star that there's still some hope left in the world, as he tells her, "I don't know if love proves God's existence or love is God himself." It's a personal film that Bergman had pulling away from his person's father's Lutheran religion to look for new ways to cope with life. He even confesses that the artist, including himself, is a self-depreciating tone, can at times feel inadequate and becomes a charlatan when he uses someone else's experience as if it were his own voice of experience. Though not the kind of family drama that would appeal to a Hollywood audience, it's the kind of drama that surfaces during the 50s and 60s at European art house cinemas and took hold among a certain literary segment of the American population as what mature cinema should be like. Okay, fairly thorough review from an American who I read quite regularly. Okay, No Way Out, 1997. This is regarded as a thriller, directed by Roger Donaldson, writing by Kenneth Thiering for the novel and the screenplay Robert Garland. The cast in the lead role is Tom Farrell, played by Kevin Costner. David Bryce is played by Gene Hackman. Sean Rung plays Susan Atwell. Will Patton is Scott Pritchard. Howard Duff is Senator Duval. And what have we got to say about the plot? Well, it's a thriller, as I mentioned, and let me go a quick look at it. There's begins with a structure that's similar to Alfred Hitchcock. An innocent man stands wrongly accused of a crime, and all the evidence seems to point right back to him. There are a couple of neat twists. One is when the innocent man is placed in charge of the investigation of the crime. Man's played by Costner. He plays a career Navy man who's assigned to the personnel staff of the Secretary of Defence, played by Hackman. And Hackman is devoted to Assistant Patton want Costner to handle some sensitive assignments for them involving the Secretary's pet defence projects. Okay, let's get on with it. So this is Saltburn. This is a new movie just released, being highly regarded by critics, directed and written for the screen by Emerald Fennell. The cast. In the cast we've got in the lead roles Barry Coburn plays Oliver Quick, Jacob Elordi plays Felix Catton, Archie Madekwe plays Fala Start, Sadie Soverell is Annabelle, Richie Cottrell plays Harry, and then some famous actors and actresses. Richard E. Grant is Sir James Catton. He's clearly the father of Felix, and his mother is played by Rosamund Pike. She's Elspeth, and Carrie Mulligan pops up as poor dear Pamela. And this movie is set in 2006, and it's set in Oxford. It's about Oliver, an impoverished academic scholarship nerd from Merseyside, and his parents have mental health issues and a drug addiction, with his dad recently dying. And Oliver, nicknamed Ollie, can't make any friends among the school aristocrats. His only friend is a fellow needy student, the brainy maths whiz-kid, Michael Garvey, who's played by Ewan Mitchell. That is until he actually bumps into the handsome and heavily tattooed Felix Catton, who's a popular upper-class student. He lends him his bike so he can get to class in time. Felix is super cool, big man, and he scores with the ladies without exerting much effort. So this movie is about the English ruling class and social climbers who are phonies. It gleefully shows up the dark side of academia, and there's a highfalutin setting with lots of sex, drugs and rock music. Okay, that's the backdrop. Let's get to watch it. Ollie is a sponsored student, whereas Felix, of course, is part of the mega rich part of society, and they have their issues. They see life very, very differently. Felix gets very uptight when Ollie tries to tidy his room up, and this idea that Felix has that, oh well, if it's a shithole, so be it. Whereas Ollie is quite fastidious. Sharing of families becomes an issue for Ollie, although he does share about his father's drug habit and their parents' mental health problems. But Felix is also pretty derogatory about his parents, so they do have an identity there, but they view it in rather different ways. So after Oliver finds out that his father has died whilst he was drunk, fell over and hit his head on the curb or something, Felix shows a considerable amount of concern and ends up inviting Ollie to his stately home, or what I expect to be something similar. I assume it's sort of the end of term because exams are just about to be complete. It's okay, this movie, but it lacks a bit of a spark. I've seen Barry Keoghan before. He's a good actor, but one hopes that it will sort of get a little bit more intriguing when we get to Saltburn, which is the name of Felix's home estate. So Ollie arrives at this huge stately home, which really sort of overawes him, really. But he's finally, after getting past the sort of butler, Felix then gives him a whistle-stop tour. As he floats through all these rooms in this vast mansion, stately home, as he's describing all the places, it reminded me of that ridiculous board game called Cluedo, where Miss Scarlett's in the study with the knife, and then we get to meet the three major stars in this movie: Richard E. Grant, Rosamund Pike, and a very sort of heavily made up Carey Mulligan, who looks like some sort of trashy sort of hippie from yesteryear, with wads of makeup, to the point that she looks almost like an ugly sister. The film certainly wants to display its excesses with regard to the use of alcohol and sexual preferences, and young Oliver seems to revel in this sort of very promiscuous atmosphere. The party that we see leads to some spirited karaoke, and then the following after a rather strange sort of scene involving one of the friends of the family, Farley, where Oliver appears to be possibly performing some sort of sexual activity with him. Then we go to the sort of garden for the following morning, and Rosamund Pike's character, Felix's mother, starts to name drop about her acquaintances in the pop music field at the time of Britpop in the 90s, and name drops Blur, Oasis and Jarvis Cocker. It's all rather pomp, and but it's keeping me awake, that's for certain. On Ollie's birthday, Felix decides to surprise him with a road trip, a present. Unbeknown to Ollie, he's contacted Ollie's mother and arranged a surprise visit on his birthday. However, this unearths a lot of untruths that Ollie's been sharing with one and all about his own family. Felix feels betrayed, and then Ollie tries to gain his friendship again, having felt that it's been shattered, and it then leads to a tragedy as we sort of
get into the final quarter of the movie. The tragedy, I'll suggest that you as viewers find out, but the reaction within the aristocratic household is almost as if, well, we must keep showing our stiff upper lip in the face of what's happened and carry on as if nothing has happened. A way in which the rich tend to cope. You know, it comes to mind, what comes to mind was the death of Diana, and yet the royal family sort of carried out their duties meticulously, even in the face of that awesome tragedy. The tragedy doesn't stop. But this family, it conjures up wildly conflicting sort of similarities. Earlier I thought of the Addams family with their kookiness, and alongside that is the strangeness of the shining in this huge building, aka the hotel. And then there's other aspects like Succession, but it's certainly a bit of an odd sort of movie.